We are so lucky to be joined by Sam Sgro. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sam, if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to Brock. What made you choose Brock? What made you choose sport management?
For sure. So I grew up a lifelong hockey player and knew that I wanted to do something in sport following high school. And I wasn't sure what that was in the beginning, in my first couple of years of high school. As I started looking into university programs, I realized about sport management and learned what it was and what it entailed and how popular it was and how we are the only one in the country who graduate with a bachelor of sport management. So I learned a lot of cool things and I thought that's where I need to be. That's where I want to be. So I applied, luckily got in. And it's funny because I didn't want to go away from home at first. I was adamant. I was like, I'm staying home. I'm staying home. And ended up deciding on sport management at Brock and loved it like from the first day. Absolutely loved it. So it was definitely the right decision to make for me. And I'm so glad that I did. And it's led me here.
Fantastic. And tell me about your first sort of impressions when you started out at Brock. How was your first transition into becoming a SPIMA student?
My first transition into SEMA was definitely a little bit overwhelming and a little bit of I guess, a shock because it's now on university campus. And I feel like I would always think of university as such a scary thing. I always thought I couldn't do it. Like, I'm going to fail, like all these kinds of things. And once I got in there, and, it took me a couple weeks to kind of get in the groove. But once I did, it was pretty smooth sailing, honestly. And I'm very, lucky to have some amazing profs that helped me along the way. And that was another thing that I learned very quickly is that profs, especially in a program like SEMA, when at least I started, it wasn't huge when I started in 2017. I think it's probably grown in the past 4 years. But profs are really there to help you and want to see you succeed. And I think that was a huge part of why I transitioned pretty well is I got to know some of my profs and I went to them when I had questions and I felt very confident in that, in their ability to help me, but then in my ability to do the work. And yeah, I've had a great experience.
Fantastic. Now, what were your goals when you entered the SPIMA program? What were your sort of how did you see your career moving when you started your program?
Well, I definitely saw myself as the first female general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I went in adamant that that's what I was going to be. Um, to be honest, when I started, I kind of thought there was only really one way. There was one job. It was sales, it was tickets, it was getting in with MLSC, getting in with the Leafs. And I think that was kind of my perception of what sport management was going to be and where I was going to be. And it definitely changed over the trajectory of the 4 years that I was there. I doesn't mean that it's still not my goal, but I've definitely over the past 4 years been exposed to a lot more things and understood that sport management is a wide variety of things that, and you can make an impact in any of those things that SEMA leads you to.
It's a great answer and such good advice for students just starting out and maybe trying to calibrate their goals once they leave SPIMA. What was the first time you were exposed to the nonprofit sector?
Definitely was with in my third year in the nonprofit class with another professor at the time, and it was definitely an interesting class to learn about nonprofit and how organizations and what that means for an organization and how they run differently than an organization that is for profit. That was my first real experiences in the academic nature.
And so you learned about nonprofits. Were you thinking to yourself, "Ooh, maybe this is something I'd be interested in," or was it something where you're like, I'm not so sure at first?
I definitely think it was something that I was interested in. I've always wanted to make an impact in the lives of people in any capacity, which is why I think I was so drawn to like the position of GM as much as it's, one in a million and super something that's super, I don't want to say unachievable, but is really, really hard to achieve. There's only 32 teams and everybody seems to be wanting that job. I always wanted to make an impact. And I think in not for profit organizations, I feel at least there's a little bit more room to make an impact in people's lives and in different ways. And so I've always like been attracted to organizations that have been that way. I mean, I think that kind of varies depending on what your interests are and if not for profit organizations offer sort of your passion, but I've definitely been interested in those.
Well said, well said. And tell me about the first time you found out about the Grindstone Award Foundation and how you sort of got involved with them.
For sure. So I actually had a connection who led me to a connection and then led me to Grindstone. So it was a little bit of networking. But when I heard about it, I was like in love with it. I was like, I know that this is what I need to do, even if it's volunteering. Like I'm just so passionate about female hockey and women's hockey. And I think it's such an important game and such an important thing for everybody to, I don't want to say, be like full in and passionate about, but at least support and care about. And when I heard about Grindstone, I got so excited and I was like, I'm doing this. Like, I want to be involved in as much of it as I can.
That's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about the Grindstone Award Foundation. So for people that maybe haven't heard of it.
For sure. So the Grindstone Award Foundation was actually started in Kelowna, British Columbia. We are a nationwide foundation that makes hockey accessible to girls throughout the country who may not be able to play due to financial barriers. So we provide things like funding for their registration to be able to play. We have great sponsors like the PWHPA and the NHLPA who actually help and donate equipment, and then we give that to our grant recipients. So we do a lot to help basically Canada's future stars in female hockey be able to realize that dream.
Oh, what a perfect foundation to meet the goals that you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier in hockey, and what a wonderful foundation as a whole. So
Mm-hmm.
you find the Grindstone Award Foundation, you start working for them. What was your first sort of experience working with the Grindstone Award Foundation?
For sure. So my first sort of experience was actually on marketing. I did a little bit of writing for them. I used to, when I was in my fourth year of university, I actually did some writing for the Nashville Predators virtually, but still did that. So I kind of had a little bit of that under my belt and knew that it was something that I enjoyed. So I actually started out on marketing and I really enjoyed it. I wrote an article about a season ticket, sorry, not a season ticket holder, a grant recipient, and I actually interviewed her mom and got to have that experience. So I wrote about that, started out there, and then kind of transitioned into the role I'm in now.
Wonderful. And could you tell us a little bit about your role right now? What is your role? What do you sort of do on a month to month or week to week basis?
Absolutely. So I'm actually on the outreach team right now. What that consists of is basically myself and my supervisor reaching out to people and organizations who we think would create a great partnership with Grindstone. So I'm actually very lucky that Professor McKee has so graciously taken us on in his class as part of his curriculum for volunteering. So situations like that, I would reach out and say, this is who we are, this is what we do. Do you see a potential partnership? We also, I outreach to a lot of other organizations. I'm actually starting a project in the near future where I'm going to reach out to a lot of universities throughout the country. One's in particular with a sport management program, but we're hoping to broaden that horizon to more schools. But my sort of project for the future is to reach out to universities with a sport management program to see if they have any interest in what we do, sort of like the partnership we have with Brock right now, but it could be on any scale just to gain exposure. We're trying to expand as far and wide as we can throughout the country. We're very lucky that we're in a couple of the big provinces. Ontario and BC are our biggest areas right now, but we definitely want to be the forefront for female hockey and being able to give girls the opportunity to play in all provinces. So part of my role is helping to gain that exposure throughout the country.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. I have a few questions about the nature of the nonprofit industry as a whole. What kinds of skills do you think are important for young students to develop if they'd like to work in the nonprofit sector?
I think definitely communication, networking is huge. I think a lot of nonprofit has a lot to do with like who you know and who somebody else knows and kind of building that good relationship. I think communication is important. It's very important to have those skills to be able to communicate what your mission is. And I think marketing is probably the biggest one because there's so many brands out there, so many organizations who do such an amazing job at marketing. And if you can learn from them and understand what they do to make their organization huge, it's a great way to model yours off of. I always think about like the Leafs, for example. They do obviously a for-profit organization and they do such a great job at marketing. They do their Leaf blueprint, they do all sorts of things. And so I think whenever we have the opportunity to learn or to market, I always hope that we learn from big organizations. Doesn't have to be in hockey, but that's just, what we are most similar to. So marketing is probably the biggest one, I would say.
That's great advice regarding, if you'd like to work in marketing for the Leafs, well, hey, the nonprofit industry has a lot of
Hmm.
opportunities for you to actually try out that type of skill. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. You mentioned the importance of networking. In fact, you even mentioned the fact that networking is kind of why you got involved
Hmm.
with Grindstone in the first place. If you were to give someone advice who's just starting out about networking specifically, what advice would you give them about networking, just starting out their career in SPIMA, or if they're towards the end of their time at SPIMA?
For sure, all you seasoned vets in SPEAM are probably sick of hearing the word. I know that I was in my fourth year and I was like, please stop saying it, but it's so true. And believe me when I say like it is so important. I think hearing it from a prof might be like, yeah, sure, okay, but hearing it from a former SPEMA student who's lived it, it's like it's super super crucial and important. And I'm so glad that I listened to all the profs who told me to network. I think the most important thing I would say is definitely network as much as you can to a wide variety of people, even if you think somebody's not going to reply back to you. The amount of times that I thought, oh, that person's not going to reply. They don't have any interest in what I can bring. Never doubt yourself. Never say no. Always just send that email. If they respond, that's amazing. And if not, oh well, and you move on to the next one. But definitely try to network in a variety of organizations, in a variety of ways, even if you don't think something is like super of interest to you. Always network. I'm very big in like the community growth and public relations and like community relations side of it. But I would still network with somebody even in sales or even in like, let's say marketing, just because you never know where that leads. Like they might be looking for something like a grindstone to work with, and they're just kind of waiting for the right person to come along. And it might not be that it leads you to a career, but it could lead you to something else. So I would say network in as many ways as you can.
That is fantastic advice. Well articulated too. Very, very, very well done there. I'm
Thank
curious about
you.
another part of the general skills necessary for nonprofits. What skill do you think that you have now that you really developed during your time at SPIMA that's helping you in your role at Grindstone?
I definitely think the diversity and I think I've a lot more well-rounded now. That's what I learned from STEMA. We've taken a wide variety of classes. I don't know how much that's changed since I've been in the program, but I remember just taking sort of one of everything and kind of understanding and being able to pull from what I've learned in STEMA and in my degree and be able to use that now with Grindstone and remembering how marketing works or like what goes into events or sponsorship or the importance of networking and communications and marketing. So I think I'm definitely a lot more well-rounded now. And I think that plays a huge part into my role at Grindstone is yes, I'm on the outreach team and that's primarily what my focus is, but I'm able to do things in marketing. I'm able to do, things in writing. I have that technical element of like Excel sheets and learning how to, take that on and stats and like what's our percentage of girls in Ontario who are playing versus parts of the other provinces. So SPIMA has definitely made me very, very well rounded for this role in Grindstone. I kind of take a little bit of everything that I've done in SPIMA and put it into what I do.
Wonderful. That's fantastic to know. That's fantastic to learn. I'm sure fantastic for everyone to hear as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of challenges have you overcome so far in your role at Grindstone? What are some of the everyday and every week and every month challenges that you deal with in the nonprofit sector?
For sure. I think the biggest challenge for us, and actually some very exciting news out of women's hockey yesterday, but the biggest challenge for us is being able to compete with the Leafs and all the teams, in North America, particularly in Canada, but in North America, who are the men's teams, who people want to go out, want to see, have a connection with. So it's the biggest challenge for us is how do we become half of what they are or a quarter of what they are? How do we attract fans? How do we make the female game appealing? And for those of you that are not aware, some big news came out yesterday about female hockey and how the NHL is trying to bridge the two women's leagues to come and formulate one league and to kind of get the ball rolling. So that's a massive step for us, for our organization, but for females everywhere as well. And for the current ladies who are involved in women's hockey, it's huge. So the steps are definitely going in the right direction. But for us, that's the biggest challenge right now is how do we become appealing in a market where, Toronto's got all the professional sports teams that we do. How do we gain interest? How do we become of interest to people? How do we become different? How are we a niche market? So it's definitely challenge, but we're open to it and we're ready for it, and we can't wait. We're super excited to take on this challenge, and hopefully one day my dream would be to be as big as the Leafs and be selling out arenas and everything like that. But for now, it's small steps. But I know that we definitely are going in the right direction.
Wonderful. Now, thank you again so much for spending so much time. We'll leave you with one sort of final set of questions here.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give a student who's just starting out SPIMA, and what advice would you give someone who's just about to leave their degree? And you can start with the brand new student.
For sure. So for a brand new student, it's kind of what I said earlier: network as many ways as you can. Find something that you're passionate about early on. I've always been passionate about hockey. I volunteered with the Brock men's hockey team doing tickets. Like it didn't seem like a lot at the time, but for me, I was still in the arena. I was still able to watch the sport that I loved and be able to be involved. So I would definitely say find something you're passionate about early and start volunteering right away, as quickly as you can, as much as you can. Obviously, university is a commitment. It's like a full-time job, but if you can find something that you're passionate about, volunteering, even as simple as like going to the arena and seeing the local arena in St. Catharines and seeing if like their team needs help, or reaching out to a team wherever you're from if you've chosen to stay at home for this, and just reach out and say, hey, I'm starting my sport career. I'd love to be able to help out in any way that I can. Do you need something from me? Do you know of anybody? So just kind of networking and finding something you're passionate about. And I guess I would kind of say the same thing for somebody leaving the program. I kind of left in a little bit of a strange time, being right smack in the middle of COVID, but I would think probably the same. Find something you're passionate about within the industry. The thing is, there's so many people vying for ultimately very few jobs in the sport industry, and it doesn't need to be that you right away are the GM of the Leafs. It's not going to happen. I wish it did, but it doesn't. And I definitely would say be passionate about something, find that passion and roll with it. And if it's not something that's common or ordinary, it doesn't matter. It's what you want to be doing, and don't let anything cloud your judgment or stop you from doing what you want to do. Ultimately, you're doing what's best for you and doing what you're passionate about, and that's going to lead you so many places.
Sam Sgro from the Grindstone Award Foundation, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom with Brock students new and nearing the end of their time in SPIMA. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Professor McKee.